Mitch Lawrence, SiriusXM, NBA Radio. He joins us down the boardwalk on the hotline where the Sixers have made a major move, Mitch. And, you know, we don't typically see a move of this magnitude in this stage of the season. So let's start there. What's the message that the Sixers say in mid-November, we've got to make a move of this magnitude?
They're saying we're not good enough to beat Toronto or Philly, or maybe even Toronto or Boston, or maybe even Milwaukee. As I was telling your guy Josh when he said, "Hey, Philly fans are all excited. They got a real big-time player." I said, "Yeah, he has a chance to ruin another team."
We've heard that from a lot of people. I mean,
now, come on, Mitch. You don't really believe that.
Here's the deal with Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler is going to, I mean, if I'm Markelle Fultz, oh my gosh, has he got something to worry about, because he looks like he's going to be picked on by Jimmy Butler as if he doesn't have enough problems. But yeah, Jimmy Butler, look what he did in Chicago, look what he just did in Minnesota, and that's with Tom Thibodeau, his guy, who he completely, basically turned the tables on. And what a mess in Minnesota. But hey, Philadelphia got themselves a good player, a very good player. There's no doubt. I mean, he's going to help at both ends of the court. It's just all the other stuff you got to worry about with Jimmy Butler, how he deals with his young guys.
Yeah, there's always two. I mean, look, and I'm not in Minnesota. I haven't talked to a whole heck of a lot of people out there. There's always two sides of the story. One side you would hear he's a bad locker room guy. Now, Elton Brand said today they love him in the locker room, but they acknowledge that he's very demanding on the court. I mean, is it fair to say that everyone takes accountability and that Butler's being criticized because of his passion to want to win, and the Minnesota kids maybe didn't have that same passion, or is that just baloney?
Well, it's part baloney. I mean, Jimmy Butler's like the only guy who's like, oh, I'm all about winning. I don't want to lose. There are a lot of players like that, but he obviously didn't like the approach from Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins, and they didn't like him either. They hated him, and he hated them, so there's a lot of mutual feelings out there. But the shocking thing to me was that here, Tom Thibodeau, who's Jimmy Butler's guy from the Chicago days. Remember when he left, he got on Fred Hoiberg for saying, I need to be coached. I like guys like Tom Thibodeau. He totally turned on Tom Thibodeau. Brett Brown's got a lot of work to do with Jimmy Butler to get him on his side and make sure. Now, the big thing we all know is that Jimmy Butler is in a walk year, so he's got to basically mind his P's and Q's in Philadelphia if he wants the big money. Because if he doesn't, guys, and Philadelphia says, hey, this guy's a disaster in our locker room, we don't want him either, what's Jimmy Butler, how's he going to do on the open market? There's a lot of moving parts to this whole Jimmy Butler thing. But in terms of his on-court stuff, you have to like it. I mean, Minnesota made the playoffs because they had Jimmy Butler last year. Not because they had Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins. All those guys have been doing is losing as professionals. Jimmy Butler got them into the playoffs last year. He missed a ton of games, but when he got back, he got him into the playoffs. Okay, he got him to 8th place. But, then
they were third in the West when he got hurt.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, they were. They were very good. But you know what? It's not just how he plays, it's how he deals with people. And he has this, one of the things you're going to learn about Jimmy Butler, guys, he thinks he's like LeBron James or Kobe Bryant. He's not that good, but he carries himself that way. So, I mean, look, I credit Philadelphia. It's a bit of a roll of the dice. It always is with these guys. We'll see how Jimmy Butler does, but I think now, before I looked at him as well, this was a team that needed, obviously, another piece or two. Defensive perimeter-wise, they're kind of, iffy. They don't really, who can score after Joel Embiid because Fultz is now a head case and Ben Simmons, doesn't want to shoot. Jimmy Butler helps in a lot of those areas.
Mitch, let me ask you, as somebody who's covered the league well and for a while, you recognize that sometimes a player needs a change of scenery and they don't know it until they get a change. And in this case, it's not necessarily scenery. It's more the head coach. You laid out perfectly the issues that he had with a type of head coach like Tom Thibodeau. But Brett Brown appears to me like almost the opposite, especially when
he actually didn't. He actually had issues with Fred Hoiberg.
Pardon me.
Tom Thibodeau until he got there. That's why we were all shocked.
Correct.
By all of a sudden he wanted out. Tibbs is his guys. But anyway, you may continue.
No. I'm saying as far it's more about the distancing of recently with Tom Thibodeau out in Minnesota, and Brett Brown is way more player, run the squad, not as controlling and not as micro of a head coach. So I wonder if Jimmy doesn't realize it until he gets here, that change, almost a 180, might be better for him, even though he had this personal connection with Tom Thibodeau that broke down.
Well, I'm sure Brett Brown, like Tom Thibodeau, here's the thing about Minnesota. he was forced, Tom Thibodeau, to trade Jimmy Butler, which obviously he didn't want to do because he knows that Jimmy Butler is the key to him making the playoffs because Tom Thibodeau is all about making the playoffs. And the owner out there, Glenn Taylor, basically, he didn't back off the mandate. He didn't tell anybody, hey, we're going to trade Jimmy Butler, and by the way, I'm going to give Thibodeau a pass this year. He still needs to make the playoffs. Now, Brett Brown needs to make the playoffs. Brett Brown needs to probably get to, the second or third round, maybe the conference finals. We'll see.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pressure on Brett Brown. Has he ever coached anybody like Jimmy Butler before? I don't know. You know what? This is going to be very interesting to watch. Look, they could have a lot of success there, but I remember early on when Jimmy Butler became available, I talked to people who were familiar with Philadelphia's thinking. And the deal was, they love his talent. They'd love to have him play there. But you want to know something? With those two young players, they're big-time stars who have tremendous ceilings in Embiid and Simmons. They don't want any part of Jimmy Butler. Okay, 13 games into the year, they decided we're going to take a chance on Jimmy Butler. It's not just Brett Brown. It's his dealings with Embiid and Simmons that you have to worry about if you're the Sixers owners, Josh Harris, and all those guys.
It might seem like an obvious question, so just bear with me, but is Jimmy Butler in his best interest, is it not to establish as tight and as close of a friendship right away with Joel Embiid first and foremost, and then the trickle-down effect of everybody else coming along?
Well, I don't know about friendship-wise, but he certainly can't go in there and drop a nuclear bomb on the locker room.
That's fair.
And basically a slash-and-burn type of thing where he's just going to kill these guys publicly and basically say, you know what, I work harder than these guys, and these young players don't know, and I know how to win. Keep in mind, Jimmy Butler has been as far as the playoffs as Embiid and Simmons, right? The second round?
Yeah.
That's it.
Yep.
He passes himself. I'm telling you, he passes himself off as the guy who's walking in there with a bunch of rings he's going to drop on the table. They've come further in less time than Jimmy Butler has in his career. So, you know what? The locker room order there is obviously Embiid, and it's obviously Simmons, and Jimmy Butler has to figure out a way not to piss those guys off.
Mitch Lawrence, SiriusXM, NBA Radio, Sporting News, Forbes, longtime NBA columnist.
Show on Sirius. We were talking about this before you came on. You and Geltz is must listen, man.
Well, sometimes we yell at each other.
No, that's why it's right. Must listen.
Let me ask you.
I appreciate that. Anybody wants to get up at the crack of dawn on a Saturday or Sunday and listen to me and Geltz yell or talk, you're welcome to.
Listen,
we enjoy it. We invite everybody to call.
I have a weekly hit on our local Fox affiliate in Philadelphia, and I get an hour of your show leading up to it, and then I get the final, I'd say 30, 45 minutes of it on my way back, and I'm locked in every weekend.
Oh, good.
He asked me.
I appreciate it.
He asked me,
did I ever?
He said to me, do I ever listen? I said, I'm sticking it to the man.
And then,
there you go.
Then I knew. I knew Mike was on the right side of things.
All right. There you go. Well, guys, we appreciate it. We like that.
Just take out the fact that Butler may be a jerk or maybe a cancer. Which we're not. Well, that's neither here nor here. That. What kind of fit is he as a player with what Philadelphia has?
Now, he's still not a perimeter guy. You guys need perimeter shooting. I can't believe they're actually interested in Carmelo Anthony. I'm not buying that. He doesn't. Carmelo is another issue, but he's not. I find that hard to believe. Anyway, watch it happen. Anyway, Jimmy. Well, for the first thing is for Jimmy Butler. He can score. Right there you've got Markelle Fultz, who's got problems just basically between his ears in terms of scoring, in terms of stuff he was supposed to do. He's got problems with free throw. You know the whole litany of stuff with him offensively. So you've got Joel Embiid, and Ben Simmons doesn't want to shoot. So you're going to have an added scoring punch in Jimmy Butler. And then defensively, guys, you saw what happened against Rozier in the playoffs last year on the perimeter. They've got right now one of the best on-ball defenders in the game. That's why when you look at it on paper, this looks like this is a no-brainer. This is a great move. And maybe it'll turn out to be a great move. Maybe this is the move that put Philadelphia over the top in the East. I still like Toronto. I still like Boston. But those teams have issues, too. You got Kawhi Leonard. Everything that's happening with him in terms of is he just basically a rental there. So you have that for Toronto. And in Boston, you've seen the type of start they've had where Kyrie Irving's coming out saying we're not as good as we think we are, and other comments that suggest that this is not going to be smooth sailing all the way for the Celtics. So, I think Philadelphia's got a great chance to obviously rise up the ranks of the East.
Mitch, it's funny because I look at the arrival of Jimmy Butler and I think, okay, the pick and roll possibilities with Butler and Embiid and on this team should have this squad salivating. And then I look at the history so far. They don't run pick and roll. Now, for reasons that you can point to as far as Fultz and Simmons on the floor, but my goodness, this should be the cattle prod to Brett Brown to shock his ass into running as many pick and rolls as he can.
Well, you know what? You got something there. And if Brett Brown, all these coaches, what they want to do is bring out the best in these players and always go to their guys' strengths. So if that's what's going to be for Jimmy Butler to get the most out of Jimmy Butler, if you want to do that stuff, then Brett Brown's going to have to wake up and do that stuff for the Sixers, and basically there's going to be a retooling. I would assume, because Brett's a pretty good coach, and I think everybody in Philadelphia. I don't know what the patience level is down there, but there's going to have to be some patience. It's just like in Boston, where they've got Kyrie back and Gordon Hayward, who has really looked bad so far, but they've got to work him in. There's some time here that needs, these teams need to get these new guys going. And in Jimmy Butler's case, Brett Brown's going to need. I don't know how long it's going to take, but it's not going to happen overnight. All this stuff's not going to click overnight.
Right.
And like I said, talent-wise, you get a top 20, 25, wherever we want to put Jimmy Butler. We know what he is. I mean, that's a big, big lift for the Sixers. I mean, we knew they tried to get, Kawhi Leonard. They did not have the score that they could send San Antonio like Toronto had. Toronto gave him DeMar DeRozan because Greg Popovich said, if you want Kawhi Leonard, you got to get me a guy who can get me 25 a night. They didn't have that. And they've tried other, I never bought into the LeBron stuff. I thought LeBron was going to L.A. all the way. I thought that was just like a fantasy when he mentioned that to Philadelphia. I never gave Philadelphia a chance. So finally, they do get themselves a big-time player in Jimmy Butler, but we know he's got the baggage, and we're going to see if he, what he does in terms of laying out the future. Is he a guy who they want to give a max, this 5-year, $100 million, $90 million deal where Jimmy Butler has also shown some sign? Are you worried about him kind of wearing down? Do you want to give him $40 million? Is he a $40 million player? There's a lot of questions that are going to be answered here over the next few months.
No doubt. One question that might not be answered, though, is Fultz. I mean, is this an indication that they've, I don't want to say given up on him, but is that the indication that they realize he's not what they intended him to be when they drafted him?
Well, his last year was a total washout, and if you only gave the guy, a dozen games this year, then you're kidding yourself, because he played, 1 year at Washington. He's 19 or 20 years old when they got him. I don't think they've given up on him, but I think they do realize that he is a big-time project, more of a project than, let's say, Jason Tatum. And by the way, Jason Tatum's come back to earth this year, right?
Yep.
I mean, everybody compares Fultz to Tatum, and it's obvious as to reasons why. But look at what's happened to Tatum now when all of a sudden defenses are now locked in on him. He's no longer the guy who's like, who is this guy who just got out of Duke? We don't know how to cover him. Now people know his games. It's a lot different in his second year. So getting back to Fultz, I think Philly still likes him. I haven't heard anything otherwise. But I think it's a situation where he's got a lot of problems in his game, and he needs time to work those things out. And in the meantime, with Jimmy Butler, you can be a lot more patient with him.
Let me add, and you brought this up, you touched on it earlier in the interview, but I did want to just have you expand on it a little more, Mitch, and that's listen, I get Twitter, and everybody's having fun with the memes and the GIFs of Butler yelling at Fultz to shoot, and then the video of somebody crying in the corner. But one thing, and I'll appeal to you, because I know that you guys have been all over this story since it started with Butler leaving and how Butler is as a teammate, and this is just the outside, but it seems as if Butler cares if you care. And even as you said it today, Markelle Fultz is at least trying. Now, I know the body language at times has been difficult on the bench, but it looks, at least with the videos in the summer and what he's been doing, that he's not just throwing his arms up saying, I don't give a damn about this. At least he's trying. He's not where we want him to be. But don't you think, or do you think, Jimmy Butler at least can appeal to something in Markelle Fultz where he's at least giving some of a damn?
Yeah, I think, what Jimmy Butler appears, part of me has a little problem with Jimmy Butler when guys criticize other guys because you don't work as hard as I do. And I mean, that just, Karl Anthony Towns has a much higher ceiling than Jimmy Butler. If Karl Anthony Towns plays and develops the way he's supposed to, he leaves a guy like Jimmy Butler in the dust. Jimmy Butler's got a ceiling. Karl Anthony Towns' ceiling is an MVP quality player. That's not Jimmy Butler. So I'm always kind of like, yeah, this guy's casting aspersions on a guy. He's very young, or he might be immature. And by the way, Karl Anthony Towns now, no excuses. He's got to leave Minnesota somewhere, and that's no sure thing. So getting back to your original point, I mean, we'll see how Jimmy Butler relates to these guys. We'll see how he meshes. We'll see what he says in terms of his demands. We'll see what he goes public with. I mean, he's one of these guys. In my mind, he ruined his reputation because a lot of that stuff he should have kept in the locker room in Minnesota, and he decided to go public with it as a way to try to light a fire under these guys. And I'm a guy who, when this trade was made a couple of drafts ago, I said, wow, this is a home run for Tom Thibodeau. He gets a guy he knows. He gets a guy he was in Chicago with. He had some element, not a lot of success playoff-wise, but, hey, they made the playoffs. And he knows Jimmy Butler, and he's going to instill a work. He'll bring his work ethic, which is legendary, and he's going to be great for these young guys. Man, was I wrong. The only person who was probably more wrong than me was Tom Thibodeau, who's paying the price. He's probably going to lose his job over this. So, look, a lot of stuff has to play out for Philadelphia in the right way for Jimmy Butler. I just hope Jimmy Butler can stop with the nonsense about nobody wants to win, more than me. Nobody wants to, works harder than me, and kind of like take a little step back and realize that he's not LeBron James, and realize also that, guys, he's got to salvage his reputation here.
Yeah.
Because I'm telling you what, over the last few weeks and months, he has just been, and he did it to himself. It was all self-inflicted. Here's a guy who quit on the team. He didn't want to play in certain games. He basically used, I'm not going to play tonight. I've got general soreness. Why? Because I didn't attend training camp. Because I didn't get in training camp when he pulled the plug himself on training camp. There's a lot of stuff that he built up his career a certain way, his reputation a certain way, and he destroyed it over the last few months.
Mitch Lawrence, SiriusXM, NBA Radio, Sporting News, Forbes, and, of course, right here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline, you'll see Jimmy Butler's debut tomorrow night, and you can hear that game live right here on 97.3 ESPN. Well, Mitch, if anything, it has made a very entertaining makes for a very entertaining East, because I agree, Toronto, Milwaukee, Boston, Philly, if you like Indiana, it seems like there's going to be 4 or 5 teams that are going to be battling out in this East. And in the West, Golden State, I don't know if there is an adversary for them out there.
It's internal. It's all about Kevin Durant right now and Draymond Green going at it last night. That's a big problem, and Steve Kerr's got to figure out what's going on there. I hope you guys saw it at the end of regulation when Draymond Green screwed up, and then he and Durant went at it, and apparently it carried over to the post-game locker room. To me, that's the only thing that could upset the apple cart in Golden State. If everybody's healthy and Steph Curry is okay and Kevin Durant's okay, the only thing that could basically get them sidetracked, derail that whole deal to the third straight in 4 and 5 years, would be the internal issues that we saw last night. Believe me, I don't think that's going to happen, but it's also worth noting that, they play against, I guess, Atlanta tomorrow or whatever, and everybody's going to, all of a sudden now, it won't be a Laker day to tune into the West Coast. It'll be the day to watch how Golden State, how they get along with each other, because that is the big deal between Durant and Draymond Green.
Right now in the West, Portland is number 2. I know we're very early, but if Portland ends up being the second best team out West, this might be a skip through the playoffs for Golden State.
You know what? I was wrong about Portland coming in. They had the embarrassing sweep at the hands of the Pelicans. Now, it was a 3-6 last year, and it was a little misleading because there are only a couple of win difference between the two teams. But I figured off that sweep, they didn't improve their team. Coming off a sweep, I figured it would carry over, a little hangover here for Portland. They really didn't improve their team at all. They still have McCollum, who's a nice player. I think he's a little overrated at points, but okay, and they still have Lillard, who to me is a top 10 player a lot of times in the league, one of the great point guards, a great leader. And I just said to myself, you know what, Portland's that type of team. They'll probably be 9th, 10th this year. They've gotten off to a tremendous start. I was totally wrong about them, so good for Terry Stotts. Good for them. But, yeah, the West is the East all of a sudden looks like the premier conference now, which we haven't seen for a long time.
Hey, Mitch, quick one for you. Based off of what we just saw, Jimmy Butler now traded to Philadelphia. I know it's not often that you see trades happen in this month or even December. So just looking at it before the actual deadline, who, in your opinion, would be the biggest name that gets moved?
Oh, boy. Who's the biggest name to get moved?
Can you see? It's early. They've played 13 games, but could you see Washington break up and maybe try to move somebody?
I'm glad you raised them. They should have done that a long time ago. They should have gotten rid of John Wall. It seems like I've been more critical of John Wall than any other player over the last couple of years because I just think he's the wrong type of leader. Guys that are good leaders, most fans just say a leader just leads in a good way. There are people who lead in a bad way, and I think that's John Wall. If you Google John Wall chemistry problems in Washington, there are like 8 stories over the last 4 years that pop up. So we all know they've got problems. They're very patient down there. Ernie Grunfeld and Ted Leonsis. Which is good for Scott Brooks as of right now. He's got like 3 years, $21 million left on his contract. But you know what? Washington is one of these teams. They talk a great game. They never produce. I know, people would say, well, why would a team take a John Wall? He's had knee issues. He's got this huge extension coming up. He's got, $40 million he's going to be making. Watch a team like Phoenix, very desperate for a point guard, try to make a move for John Wall. I've heard they're interested. I don't think there have been any talks between these teams, but they're obviously there's the situation. Here's the thing too. The fans sometimes say you can't trade this guy because of his contract. I remember they said that about Blake Griffin. All it took was one desperate team, Detroit, Stan Van Gundy. They made the trade for him. So what? You know what, guys? There are times where these contracts that look impossible to move, that these teams are over a barrel, it's killing their salary cap, all of a sudden, watch, if Washington decides we're going to break this up and try to go with Bradley Beal and somebody else at point guard and trade John Wall, Phoenix would be the ideal landing spot because at least the last I heard, which was only last week, they're very interested.
All right, Mitch Lawrence right here, Mitch_Lawrence here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. The NBA really heating up. Appreciate it as always, pal.
Thanks,
Mitch.
Guys.
Thanks for listening. We
awesome
appreciate
stuff,
that, all right? Talk to you
later.
Don't
let Geltzeiler get on your case, man, all right?
Please. He's just as annoying as a gnat. Don't worry about him.
Good stuff from Mitch as always.